All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. Well, welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Taft, as you know, and this is going to be a good one. We've got so much to talk about. Certainly the investigation into what happened in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Another thing, though, that has really been bothering me is the fact that we need to talk a little bit about free speech. And I'd like to say a word about free speech following Charlie's assassination. And let's be clear, free speech is something that government may not deprive you of. It may not take your speech away. It may not do that to you. Although, as we discussed in the flag burning aspect of it a couple weeks back, they get to decide time, place, and manner, but they cannot tell you what you can and cannot say. That's viewpoint discrimination, and that's against the Constitution. So free speech is something that the government may not do to you. Free speech is yours, depending on the rule of the social media platforms, right? You can't just say anything. I'm still being shadow banned for a variety of things. So that's what happened when the left, in charge of all the social media platforms, starting well before 2020, but certainly enforced during the 2020 era, when the social media companies were leaned on by government to censor, evaporate discussions on topics having to do with the illness that was going around, the laptop from hell, and they were all obliterated. All of those entries were obliterated at the behest of the social media companies. Courts differ, but the paper trail don't lie. Many conservatives' opinions online publications were nearly put out of business. The one I worked for was nearly put out of business by design, by the left, by the people in charge of telling you what you could and could not say. And we lived the nightmare. Man, oh man, it was frightening, very frightening for a long, long time. And so it does my heart no good to see that people are just, chomping at the bit to deprive other people who have deplorable opinions of their right to say them. And so it's a very difficult thing for me. Now, the censorship of people like me was carried out all the way up to when Trump 47 took office, and then they stopped, largely snuffed out while they got rid of a bunch of people. I say, hey, man, you cannot do that. Trump administration knew what a toll the censorship was taking on the right. And I can personally attest to all the stories. Malign cancel culture was so bad that at one point I began deleting my Twitter following. Remember, this is before Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed it to X and making it a more free speech platform. But I went through everything. I started deleting all my Twitter accounts, or Twitter messages. And because I just thought, no, I'm just going to keep it current. I'm going to do one message a day or one message per, and then I'm going to delete it. And it's going to be one message and I'm going to delete it because I was sick and tired of somebody else telling me what I could and could not say. So this was government control of speech, because the government was asking the social media platforms to tailor messages and not allow certain people to say certain things. The laptop, the pandemic, all sorts of things. And so when I heard Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, say on a podcast yesterday, at the time this is being live streamed, so that would be Tuesday, that she had a problem with hate speech in some sort of gauzy answer she gave, I thought, oh, wrong answer, honey. No. Charlie isn't here because people wrongly accused him of spewing hate speech. That was not it at all. They just didn't like his speech. They pretended it was hate speech. Anything they didn't like, they called hate speech. There's no such thing as hate speech. That is nonsense. There's no such thing as a person who doesn't like what you have to say and they're offended saying, you can't say that because I don't like it. Yeah, we give a nod legally to some hate speech laws, which are, I believe, rooted in nonsense, not rooted in the Constitution for sure. So what you can do, if you don't like someone's message, like, for example, several messages on my Facebook account have just gotten disgusting. I mean, I say, look, you have until X number of hours, and you have to be able to bring the receipts and uphold your claim with proof that Charlie said this, or this. You have to prove it. And if not, you're out of here. People think that because they're offended, it makes your speech wrong. It just makes them stupid. What you can do is you can just turn them off. Stop reading them, block them. And now the people who celebrated the end of Charlie Kirk are losing their jobs. Oof, man, that is hard. I mean, I can remember people I know or people on my side of the political aisle losing their jobs over failure to get a particular kind of medical procedure. If I were an employer, I mean, I would, of course, want to balk at just summarily firing somebody. But I also, because some of these messages are so grotesque, some of these images that they post and some of these thoughts they have about how he deserved it, that's absurd. But when it comes out of the mouth of a teacher or at the pen of a teacher or a doctor, I mean, do you really want someone who glories in this violence to try to take care of somebody with whom they disagree? 50% of the country disagrees with the other side. Yeah, it's absurd. If I were a hospital, I'd say, take a hike. You cannot be that intolerant of someone else's opinion or someone else having that opinion and coming to you with a MAGA hat on or something like that, and then you saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't treat you. That's absurd. So if an employer, even a school, a printer, a store, a hospital, decides they don't want somebody who glorifies in the entrails of their personal foe being displayed in public, well, they have every right to fire them. They do. Sometimes you are subjected to the results of your own stupidity, and that will make you more resilient and perhaps more tolerant. If your doctor was jubilant at the ending of Charlie Kirk and you share that belief, would you trust a doctor who disagreed with you politically? Would you trust him to be giving you life-saving care? I mean, if you have to think about it, there's your answer. You had your free speech and apparently can talk about all sorts of unsavory things on Discord, but in real life, there are consequences for what you say to polite society. It's just true. Now, I don't want the edicts to come from government, but people of goodwill don't want these monsters working for them. Right? You have an obligation to let them know that slaking for someone else's blood is really a bad look for the company. Got that, Office Depot? They learned real fast and apologized, and somebody was fired. Okay, that's all I have to say about that. But I will tell you something. There's another way that somebody's coming at this. And let me take my drink here. I didn't warm up my voice enough. Another way to come after this. And, whenever you look up my name on Google, for example, there's always these entries from PolitiFact. It's pretty much the first thing that comes up. And people have messed around with my algorithm. Yes, they have. And they've messed around with my other online footprints. And so in this one, it's the PolitiFact entries from 2010. And a reporter for PolitiFact, this is when they deputized reporters in different cities to be the card-carrying mis and disinformation experts. And the reporter took me to task for making claims about some bike path markings in Portland, which were absolutely true. Absolutely true. But I was right, of course. And she completely biffed it. And then she later apologized to me for being wrong. But she never corrected it. So that's still up. That's still up. And the reason I bring it up is because, you know, they never go back. Like when Stephen King said, okay, Charlie Kirk never said you can stone somebody to, you know, till they're gone. He never said that. No kidding. Really. But somebody smart like Stephen King, you think, God, the guy writes novels, for crying out loud. He should be smarter than that. Well, no, they're not that smart. Apparently, it turns out. You know, I have written literally hundreds of thousands of words. I have spent thousands of hours over decades on the radio. I have written hundreds of thousands of words. I've done hundreds of hours of podcasting. And those fake fact checks aren't going away. So with that in mind, here's what Accuracy in Media announced this week. Accuracy in Media, that's the first really big-time media watchdog group. They're into many other kinds of things these days, but media watchdogging is certainly part of it. And so they're making sure that the ghoulish comments about Charlie are staying in the public square. They've screen capped them. They've initiated online websites to commemorate them in the name of the person who made them, so that when that person is being checked out by a prospective employer, that comes up. Because, you know, of course, employers, they, depending on the kind of job it is, they look at your digital footprint. And now, instead of you just being able to delete it and saying, you know, glory in Kirk's attack, they'll find it. And they'll go, well, you know, I don't know that I want this person working for me. Darn right. Do you want them watching your children? Do you want them working in your child care business? Do you want that? No. I mean, there are a couple of examples. Here, let me give you a couple. Here's this guy. She said, hopefully. No, he's in here. He was at the event. It was right after the shots rang out. And this is what this guy did. There's some background. I think I'll turn down the background music and listen in the event that somebody. Look at him. Now, there's some question. Is he going USA, USA? Or is he saying, yay? One of the guys who was caught right afterwards told police he did it and wanted to distract the police to give the other person, the real bad guy, time to get away. And then I wrote earlier about the guy who asked the question. And he asked the question that was being answered at the time of the event. You have to do all these things for YouTube, because if you say, make different words for, you know, if you say like what happened to him and you do it on YouTube, you can't say that. It's the dumbest thing ever. Nevertheless, we do want people to see it. So there's that. Then there's this particular one. This lady actually posted this. This lady posted this of her and her children. I mean, you may have seen it already. It's deplorable. You kind of want to call CPS on her, but we know what happens there.
News ever.
What? Donald Trump died?
Second best news.
The vice president died?
Okay, third best news.
That Elon Musk died?
Okay, no. Nobody died. My best friend's getting married.
My best friend.
Which one is it?
Taylor Swift! Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce got engaged!
Okay, lady, you just have fun with your bad self. What a weirdo. Who does that with their young kids? I mean, oh, good grief. I mean, these are how monsters are made. This guy in the Utah event, conservative Christian home. And then he went off the rails. And he went off the rails in part because I think he was gay, and then he decided to shack up with a guy who then thought he was a woman. And he probably felt like that would not be feted in his FETED in his own home. And so what's interesting is that in the last podcast we talked with you about the guy, private investigator Niels Gravelius, and he said, this was before anybody had been caught. Here's what he said. He said, well, sometimes the allies are worse than and more dangerous than the people who are offended by the speech. And so, Alex, go ahead and roll that. This is pretty interesting.
Predictable that would be a topic of discussion with Mr. Kirk, given his past discussions. If there is a conspiracy, we'll know rather quickly, I suspect. Now, this man doesn't look like a transvestite himself. It doesn't look like a female LARPing as a male. I'm not seeing female hips on that frame.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that he is a quote-unquote ally. And it is my belief that the allies are actually the more problematic, above and beyond the men and women who think they can change their gender. The allies are the ones who take such grave offense when we use the actual name of the person involved in the murder, like Robert rather than Robin with this last one in Minnesota. You remember Elon Musk had to fire his head of trust and safety in real time when Matt Walsh's film What is a Woman was being shown on Twitter that night. That was in, I think, 2022. His trust and safety people considered themselves trans allies. And think about the level of pathology necessary to think that it is your holy mission, your pure holy mission, to stop Nils and Victoria from using the actual names of these people, or to identify, Dylan Mulvanus as a male rather than a female. They'd want you to lose your scholarship, your job, to have your social media shut down, no access to the internet, no mobile telephone if they had their way. There's a lot of pathology involved in this.
Yeah. Oh, there is. And the guy to talk to is Jeff Dornik. He's the founder and CEO of Pickaxe. And you know what, Alex, you can take that off. You can take that video off. So, but Jeff Dornik is a person who is very conversant on all things digital. And he is the CEO of Pickaxe. It's a social media platform. There is, he's got a new book. In fact, let me show you the book. Hold on here. I want to make sure I get the book out there. Follow the Leader. And I really am glad he's here today. Jeff Dornik, thanks so much for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you today?
Doing really well. Thanks for having me on. Been looking forward to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. All the digital stuff, you're so conversant on this thing, and I love your takes on free speech and free speech on platforms. Very important, especially in light of what we're hearing now. People want the Discord chats, and are they going to look into the Discord conversations between the person who did this and his buddies on Discord? I mean, there are obviously legal ramifications for that. How would you sum up that entire milieu? Also, on Discord, how easily is it able to be looked at by investigators? And then I've got some other questions about what I'm seeing online. What about Discord?
Yeah, it's really interesting specifically with Discord, because from what I understand, both this basically assassin, this guy Tyler, as well as the guy who attempted to assassinate Donald Trump, both coordinated with other people on Discord. And so So I think because of the way that the infrastructure is built out, there's a lot of anonymous accounts. There's a lot of it's very easy for different people to get on there under pseudonyms and all that kind of stuff, which again, from my perspective, I think a lot of times when we see these types of events happening, and I can't speak specifically to this one, although things do seem to be hinting in that direction, that some of these people may be actually activated by bad actors, whether it's our intelligence agencies, other intelligence agencies, but they actually prey upon a lot of these people, especially people in the gaming community. A lot of them don't have strong community and strong relationships with other people. And so what ends up happening is that they're very easily activated, by certain actors in order to get them, and they don't even necessarily know that they're being activated by, let's say, an intelligence agency. So that's the problem with some of these platforms and the way that they're structured and the way that they're set up, is that you don't really know who you're talking to a lot of times. Is
that sort of like an anonymous or the Q guy or whoever that was? Who was the Q guy? What do you think?
Probably intelligence agencies. It's funny because the CNN claimed it was this guy Jim Watkins, and I've had Jim on my show multiple.
Oh, have you really?
Yeah, I've had Jim on my show multiple times, and he's an interesting dude. I don't think that he would be Q just based upon my conversations with him. But it's a funny story. When I was interviewing Jim, it was right in the middle of all the Q craziness, and I never got into that. But I was like, I want to have a conversation with the dude. CNN says this is Q, so I ended up having a conversation with him. I asked him flat out, "Are you Q?" The second I do that, I had like 500 live viewers watching at that moment. The second I did that, it dropped down to like 12. And then the crazy thing, Jim started singing the Teletubbies theme song in the middle of the show. It went from 12 back up to 500. And that happened 3 times over the course of our interview, and they were censoring that. Because I had hunches that, is this intelligence agencies? Are they covering something up? Are they pushing a psyop? Are they pushing propaganda? And the more that I look at it, the more that I think that it was a psyop.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of feels that way for sure. And the whole J6 thing was, I'm probably going to get in trouble on YouTube. We'd like to keep this episode on YouTube. Last one, we couldn't. But anyway, be that as it may. So you're thinking malefactors get in these chat rooms and begin to try to, and whoever they are, try to cause chaos.
Well, yeah, and the thing is that they know kind of who to prey on, and the certain kind of people, maybe they're alienated from their family. A lot of times you can tell certain things by the way that somebody communicates or talks or acts or things like that. A lot of times they could be alone, or they spend hours and hours and hours on these chats and in gaming and all that kind of stuff. And so there is a kind of like a specific target that they would go after. And a lot of times there's mental illness, or there's something involved. But again, it's strategically, they know who to go after. And in all reality, if you look at the vast majority of assassination attempts that have happened over the course of history, almost all of them it ended up having some form of interaction with an agent, whether they knew it or not. Going back to the JFK assassination, the MLK assassination, as time goes on, the truth comes out, and they almost always had some form of interaction with an intelligence agency, whether it's ours or a foreign one.
Yeah, that's so true. On your platform, with Pickaxe, your app, you claim not to allow that. How does that work?
Yeah, so what we actually do is we actually care about having a blue check mark and have it actually mean something. And so for us, we do a free verification. You can upload your ID. We delete it after we verify your account. But then that way, if somebody has a blue check mark on our platform, they are who they say they are. They're not some secret bad actor. You're not going to have anonymous accounts. One of the really big problems that we see on some of these other platforms is bots and anonymous accounts and trolls and all that kind of stuff. And so what we do is we're combating that by basically making it to where if you want to be seen, if you want to trend, if you want to have a recommended profile, you need to have a verified account. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to manipulate the systems, manipulate the trending, manipulate anything on our platform. You can still be there, you can comment, but you can't really, you're not going to be seen. You're not going to be able to build a big account like you can on some of these other platforms. So that's kind of why we do the verification the way we do.
So, remember Elon Musk said he was going to basically do that for his Twitter 2.0, known as X. And I could not help but wonder, after this episode last week with Charlie Kirk, that I don't know how much time you spend on X, probably not a lot because you've got other things to do. There was an influx, the likes I've never seen before, of bots, just hate crap, just the most loathsome information being put out there about Charlie Kirk, and abject lies, of course. And then in addition, like somebody had done the clarion call, everybody from Blue Sky who hated being on Twitter because we'd call them out on stuff came over for their information operation. It was just unbelievable. To what do we attribute that?
I mean, honestly, it is a known fact from all the different kinds of reporting and investigations that I've looked into that intelligence agencies, again, both ours and foreign, use bot farms in order to manipulate and push propaganda. And so if they need a narrative push, they'll have hundreds and hundreds of accounts all pushing the same thing. And people have done these kinds of things where they'll show like, they practically copy and paste from one account to the next account to the next
absolutely.
account. But it all comes down to the idea that if we can get enough accounts talking about this, we'll get one big influencer to pick up this story and push up this propaganda piece, and then they'll run with it because everybody's looking for clicks. Everybody's looking for the next big thing. Everybody's looking for the next thing that nobody else is talking about. So they know the game in order to manipulate it. And so they use that and they just flood social media with it. I think I saw a statistic that something like 70 to 80% of all internet traffic is actually bots, and something like 80 to 85% on social media platforms are bots. That's how prevalent this is, and I don't think that anybody's really taken that into account with a lot of this.
I mean, I see a lot of bots on Facebook. I'm older, so and a lot of my listeners and people I've known for a long, long time are out there, and so you see the dumbest things. So-and-so's going to buy NBC, and therefore no more Joy Behar. She's on ABC, but you understand the whole idea of the big play. But, Elon Musk said, hey, on X, we're not going to I'm going to try to get rid of as many bots as possible. And if he's doing that, he's failing.
Yeah, he's not doing a good job, and a lot of it was that he tied their verification system to their premium service, and so what ended up happening, the way that you get your blue check mark is you pay $8 a month or $10 a month or what, fill in the blank, however much money you're paying every single month. And the problem with that is that it just eventually became, as long as you're willing to pay, you can get that blue check mark. And then we started actually seeing some verified accounts that are becoming bots and trolls and anonymous accounts and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, so it's now defeating the purpose, but it's making X of money.
And then what we have is this from Blue Sky. We can thank these guys for who should be murdered next. There were all of these. It's really hard to see all of them, but who should be offed next? And then there was, just somebody was trying to do screenshots. I was like, there are so many of them, I don't even know what to do with it over on Blue Sky. Is that just as crappy as bot filled as Twitter?
Yeah, I would assume it is. I spent about 2 weeks on Blue Sky and they got banned from the platform. So I mean, I can't really attest to what's going on over there.
Oh my gosh, what got you banned? What happened?
I don't even know. Just posting some article probably about big pharma or big tech or AI or something like that. But I think the thing I think that we're seeing with the left is just how depraved they are, but also it's a symptom of the problem. The root problem, and this is something that actually Charlie Kirk was actually very effective at and was getting down to the crux of, is that, he wasn't just focusing on politics, and he wasn't even just focusing on philosophy. He was actually incorporating it down to the foundational level of truth and preaching the God. Like, he would actually preach the gospel as a Christian to the lost, to these students. And that's, I think, why he was so effective, is because that brings about transformational change. And then you see the stark contrast between somebody like Charlie Kirk, who every single person that I know that knew him said he's the nicest person that you will ever meet. He was loyal. He was the real deal. There's a lot of influencers, they're grifters, they're all that. Charlie Kirk was the real deal. But then you contrast that with the left. The left is about as atheistic and anti-God as you can possibly get. What does that mean? It means that they don't believe in your constitutional rights because they deny the rights giver. But on the flip side, also, they have no moral compass. They have no source of truth outside of themselves. And that's when it's basically they see themselves as a bunch of animals. So now it's just survival of the fittest, who ends justify the means. And we're seeing that play out to where, there is no morality. So thus, who cares if you're going to be, calling for assassinations or calling for killings or celebrating murders and assassinations? It doesn't matter because there is no morality if there's no God.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's it. Exactly it. There's a soundbite I saw, and I was going to grab it for this program, where, Charlie basically ties in why it is that we're having this schism in our country right now. And it's all because this country, the foundational principles upon which our country was founded, were all done with the view of people of faith in mind. And that for other people aren't going to get it, I suppose is another way of putting it. And so he ties that together very, very well. And he goes, the reason that we're having these problems right now is because this form of government is not for people who don't understand faith.
Yeah. And as Christians, I think, we as the church have largely failed at preaching the gospel effectively, which is why I think we're in the mess that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Especially when I've looked a lot at more, recent church history. When I started out podcasting, was actually a Christian podcast. All I did was interview theologians and all that. But it's really interesting because you see, going back to like the 90s and early 2000s, there was this shift in the church to where you began to not see the Billy Graham type evangelistic events happening at the same time. Now it started being, you'd have these theological debates and you'd have conferences about theology and about the gospel within the four corners of the church. And you're just sitting here, but what about preaching the gospel to the lost? And that's the problem is everybody forgot to actually go out into the world. And instead we separated. We saw Christians run away from Hollywood. We saw Christians run away from anywhere where we began to see a leftist infiltration. And we basically surrendered all these different components of American society and all the different levels of influence. Yeah. It's why there's no conservatives in tech. It's why there's no conservatives making, big budget films. It's, you just fill in the blank. We've basically surrendered all of that over the last 20 years. We're trying to get it back now, but it's a big uphill battle to try to get it back.
Jeff Dornik, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your insights, and please come back.
Yeah, would love to.
Following the leader. Who's the leader, Jeff?
Whichever cult leader is the person that you follow. Because I mean, like that's the thing is that a cult can be happening anywhere. I'm writing in the book actually in the first chapter about my experience in an evangelical cult where we propped up. Oh, wow. A pastor, to where it's like we're following the pastor. And, the Apostle Paul actually wrote in 1 Corinthians, I believe, that he's like, don't follow me. Don't follow Peter. You follow Christ. We're just tools. We're just following. Right. We're just tools that God uses. But I think it's very easy for us to prop up, a particular person. We find our identity in that person. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is trying to get people to understand, okay, what's your worldview? And not just what do you believe, but why do you believe it? And it better not be just because you heard your favorite person say it.
Yeah, agreed. Excellent. I appreciate it. Come back.
Thank you. Will do.
We appreciated your message today. It was really good, actually. Excellent. I didn't expect anything less. So obvious that we need to hear about stuff like that. So one of the things that people have really taken potshots at is the message that was provided by Erica Kirk Friday night. And people were so moved by this message, and some people were put off by her message. What was that all about? Well, she said that her husband's a martyr. We can't have that. She said that you have no idea what's coming. Yeah, she said that, but she said it in a way that we're going to double down, triple down. We're going to bring this message, which is peaceful. And so you have no idea. And one of the things this sort of summarizes basically what she said, and you'll have a call back to this coming up at the end of the program, but let's listen to Erica Kirk.
2 days ago, my husband, Charlie, went to see the face of his Savior and his God. Charlie always said that when he was gone, he wanted to be remembered for his courage and for his faith. And one of the final conversations that he had on this earth, my husband witnessed for his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now and for all eternity, he will stand at his Savior's side wearing the glorious crown of a martyr. Charlie loved life. He loved his life. He loved America. He loved nature, which helped him always bring him closer to God. He loved the Chicago Cubs. And my goodness, did he love the Oregon Ducks. Want me to say go Ducks, so I have to since they play on Saturday. So go Ducks. But most of all, Charlie loved his children. And he loved me with all of his heart. And I knew that. Every day I knew that. He made sure I knew that every day. Every day he would ask me, how can I serve you better? How can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? Every day. Every day. He was such a good man.
And so some people took umbrage at that, but I just wanted to make sure you saw a little bit of it. I didn't want to ignore it since everybody's probably talked about it and talked about it so much. But and it's because the University of Oregon head coach talked about Charlie Kirk, and you'll hear that coming up. And he had no idea Charlie Kirk was such a big fan. So now we've talked a lot about the messaging. We've talked a lot about the First Amendment and how we're at a very fraught point perhaps right now, because now we've heard Pam Bondi say that she's possibly, giving credence to so-called hate speech. That's nonsense. But, and in the speech inside the Discord group with the person who did this and his buddies. And, when it turns to violence, it's over. There's no more speech about it. But now, what about some of these legal aspects of it? And to turn to that, Keith Gross is coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. Hi, Keith Gross. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
You are just an inspiration for so many people, and you're your previous candidate, a person who's run many companies in Florida and much more. You're also the author of a book called Dirt Roads to Runways, and you've come from a humble beginning and made really something of yourselves. Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking as you look at the totality of this episode in American life, legally speaking.
Well, it's a really strange time, right? It seems that Americans have lost touch with the foundational principles that we should all believe in universally. The First Amendment is supposed to be something that we agree on no matter what. And increasingly, it seems like those, particularly on the left, have become comfortable with the idea of using violence against people who have opinions they don't like. That's pretty unnerving. And it leads to a lot of questions about how we got here and where do we go from here. Is, standard law enforcement going to be adequate deterrent, et cetera? There's a lot of open questions.
So these guys, the 20 persons or so on that Discord group, were they all, he told them he was going to do this. He told them the target. He told them the day. He did it. He came back and confessed, and then somebody, I think, dropped a dime on him. At least his boyfriend did, I guess. What do you make of that in terms, legally speaking? How is that something that's chargeable?
It could be. It certainly can be. Generally speaking, you don't have an obligation to report a crime as a citizen, but there's a fine line between whether or not your obligation to report involves you in a conspiracy. And so there's going to be some questions, and I haven't read the transcript, so I don't have all the facts here, but generally, to be involved in a conspiracy, there has to be an intentional act, some sort of agreement to enter this conspiracy, and typically some sort of overt action in furtherance of the conspiracy. So it's yet to be seen, and I'm sure there's a massive investigation going on right now behind the scenes into each of these people and what they may have done to intentionally join the conspiracy or further it.
Yeah. I know that there's connection, certainly, with, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, which is an old cry from the 1930s Antifa movement and communist movement. And he, of course, invoked that on his bullets. Yesterday, Donald Trump gave oxygen to the notion that we might be able to investigate Antifa as a terrorist organization. I've watched Antifa for a decade more, and I'd say that there's probably a lot of room for that. What do you think?
I think what we're seeing lately is a lot of domestic terrorism from the left. And until we start approaching it that way, it's not going to be resolved. The assassination of Charlie Kirk was 100% a domestic terrorist event. Terrorism is the use of violence to further a political goal. And that's exactly what they did when they assassinated Charlie Kirk. It was over political ideology, and it was designed to silence everyone on the right, anyone who has conservative ideas or anyone who dares to speak out in something that, a lot of people would consider politically incorrect. If you're not towing the party line and going with the leftist ideology, suddenly you're a fascist, or as some of these college kids would say, you're literally Hitler. And they do these things to sort of dehumanize and label people so that violence almost seems righteous. That's a scary thing, and it deserves to be investigated as domestic terrorism.
Yeah. I think Elon Musk said something, I'm going to botch the quote, but basically it was, they call him Hitler so that Hitler gives you permission to shoot Hitler. I mean, that's the end game.
That's exactly what it is. If you call them something that makes them dehumanized, then the violence is somehow justifiable. I think that's how they're setting this up. And I don't want to live in a post-truth world. We've got to get back to the idea that you don't call someone a fascist just because they're upholding the Constitution and enforcing the laws. But look at the pushback that the president's getting as he rounds up and deports people who are in our country illegally. He's doing exactly what the Constitution requires of him. If you don't like the law, be mad at Congress. They wrote the law. Don't be mad at the president who's just carrying it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a mess.
It is a mess.
There's nothing. He can do any manner of things. It's not going to be the right thing, right? Everybody's going to take him to task. Rounding up Antifa. Somebody on my Facebook page today said, "Oh, what is he going to do about Antifa?" And previously, he said he named them a terrorist organization. I think these guys are a terrorist organization. He said that leading up to right after his first 45 stint as president started, because they were rioting on the streets of Portland, believe it or not. And I know, shock. But it seems to me that they go, well, what are they going to do? And I go, well, they have a uniform. They take an oath of some sort. They have books, and they have a literature. They have a canon. And they encourage the other to break the law.
And when you start putting them together in a group like that, it becomes a lot easier to draw them into a conspiracy charge and say, well, these people are all associated with one another. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about conspiracy charges is that when one of them commits a crime, they're all guilty of that crime. Yeah. So it's a very large way to charge crimes if you're the prosecutor, because if you can grab one of them, you might have hundreds of them simultaneously.
Well, I'm all for building more prisons. But I'm a free speech. Listen, I'm a civil libertarian. Absolutely. Unabashedly civil libertarian. I don't think people should be put in jail for free speech. But I do think for example, there was a person who was radicalized, and he was 100% Antifa. This is during the Summer of Love in Portland, Oregon. There was so much ginning up emotional stuff going on online, on the street, uniforms worn, masks donned. And then all of a sudden, a guy they don't like, who was part of Patriot Prayer, and this was they started out as being part of the Proud Boys. Well, Proud Boys, they just, forget it. We're more Christian based. But what they do is they draw out Antifa. They'd hold free speech protests, free speech collections of people, masses of people. And then, of course, if you have a free speech event, Antifa would come out and try to destroy it. They did that at church gatherings in Portland. They did that on the streets. And so obviously these guys are literally Hitler. And one of the 100% Antifa nutballs assassinated Aaron Danielson on the streets of Portland. People always forget that. Charlie Kirk's assassination wasn't the first. President Trump's two would-be assassinations were not the first. It was Aaron Danielson in 2020 on the streets of Portland, Oregon.
I did not know that either. But
Yeah.
we've seen this sort of violence building from the left for quite some time. And it's got to be addressed seriously, because I too believe in the First Amendment as an absolute privilege. I mean, that's what it's there for. It's not designed to protect speech that everyone agrees with. It's designed to protect unpopular speech, because you don't need protection for agreeable statements. You need protection for things that people strongly disagree with. And our founders thought that was so important that not only should it be in our Constitution, it should be the first item.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I think this is a turning point in our country, right?
I sure hope it is. I think the folks on the right are obviously upset about this, as they should be. Charlie Kirk ignited a movement, though, and he really inspired a lot of young people to start to think critically and challenge the ideology that they've been told as they were growing up, to try to really grasp these principles with their own mind instead of regurgitating talking points. He would ask people to, define these situations and define themselves in logical terms. And when he started to question them, often their thought process would just kind of fall apart, and you could see the wheels turning as they started to understand that the position they thought was right didn't actually make any sense. And so I think that awakening is going to continue. There's going to be a lot of folks that pick up the microphone and continue the legacy that Charlie Kirk started. I do believe it's a turning point for the next few generations to continue moving towards constitutional principles.
There was a recent public opinion poll of the nation's college students, and it was that, this is where Charlie Kirk said that there's an assassination culture. I think it was something on the order of 40% of the students said it was perfectly fine to take out somebody like that. And now we have a new one. It's a YouGov poll. YouGov's, credibility. As a political candidate in the past, you probably know that. But there was something on the order of 40% of people on the left who believe that, sometimes it's justified. Sometimes violence is justified.
Yeah, they've been taught that sometimes standing up for the so-called underdog is worth it at any cost. And if that means violence, so be it. And that's a terrifying idea, because what they think of as the underdog seems to shift, and we've seen it lately with multiple movements. And I don't know how we got to this point in American history where people think it's okay to use violence over speech. But I do recall seeing, it wasn't many years ago, that college campuses would shut down free speech, and they'd say, this is, a safe space. If you want to do free speech, you got to do it over here in this little corner, because, we don't want these microaggressions of you telling people your thoughts that might upset them or offend them. We had all these safe space movements. I think that was part of it, really. That was a step in that direction, because they started to equate words as violence.
Yeah, you've said that the attack on Charlie is a direct attack on free speech. Can you flesh that out a little bit more?
Think about any conservative speaker who's getting on a stage this week. Every one of them is wondering whether or not there's some nut job in the audience or on a building beyond their view. That sort of chilling, that was the intent of this attack. The intent was to demonstrate that if you rile people up and say things that the left does not like, you're putting your life on the line. And that goes against the general principle that we should all agree on, that you can say anything in this country. If we can't have disagreements in a civil fashion, how do we ever move forward? Does that mean everyone just pulls back to their corner and we never have discussions about the most important issues of our time? I mean, that's what the founders wanted for us. They wanted us to have these discussions, come together as a people, make decisions, and then be governed by those decisions. You can't make decisions if you can't have debates.
I was one of the, I guess it's becoming more famous, certainly, comments that Charlie made was his ability to say, and prescience, that listen, if we stop talking, that's when the violence begins. And he was talking, and that's when the violence.
Yeah, certainly that's one of the things that makes it so upsetting is that he was doing exactly the right thing. He was doing the thing that America needs most. He was engaging in civil debates with people that disagreed with him, and he did it in a respectful way. That's what America needs more of. He was doing everything right, and this happened. It's really discouraging.
Yeah, the legal aspects. For example, there is a person who stood right up and cheered it at the time. There was the man who told police that it was he who pulled the trigger, and it wasn't. He was trying to keep them from getting the real person. I mean, there are people at the scene. There's a guy who asked the question, and the guy who asked the question, he looked, I mean, it's just a weird thing. He was asking about trans and shooting. And so there are all of these different, I'm not saying they're all connected, but it sure looks like it.
It does look like it. And I wonder what's going to happen behind the scenes with this investigation, because I'm sure law enforcement's looking at exactly those same facts, and they're wondering the same thing. The guy that stood up and said, I did it. Well, lying to law enforcement is generally a crime in most states. It is in Florida. I'm not sure about Utah, but safe to assume it's, illegal to make a false report to an officer, which is what that would have been. Whether or not it rises to the level of being, involved in the crime itself. Yeah. Or maybe he helped plan it, and that was part of the thing all along. Maybe the guy that asked the question helped plan this and knew what was going to happen. And so we're not going to know.
What's a 71-year-old guy doing there? That's how old he is. That's
he didn't look like a college student.
I mean, maybe he is.
Pretty strange.
I mean, I don't even know, but it was just like, what is going on, man? What is going on?
But helping the killer escape by jumping up and claiming to have been the shooter, that's definitely actionable for the prosecution. And I'll be surprised if he's not eventually charged with that. The other fellow that jumped up and cheered, heinous, but that is protected speech to say awful, horrible things. Makes him an awful person that should probably be taken out of civil society and no one should talk to him anymore. But he's not going to be prosecuted for making that horrible statement.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I don't think so either, as horrible as it was. So, and then we have the boyfriend or the girlfriend or the gay lover who wants to be a girl. What do you think he's subject to, legally speaking?
I don't know yet. I think it's going to be a wait and see situation. We're going to have to see what comes out during the investigation. It's hard to believe that they wouldn't know what their lover was up to, considering how directly connected it was to the basis of their relationship. I think it's reasonable to assume that he knew or he helped or something. I think we're going to have to find out where that investigation leads as they tell us more.
Now, we've heard about a letter. We've heard about a letter that somehow disappeared. And the letter was between the two of those men. And somebody purporting that this is the letter put it up on X today. Let's take a look at it. It looks like it's a script, because I think somebody got a look at it, took notes, and then put it out on X. We have another one as well. So it's a confession. It's talking about the rifle. I don't want to give it too much energy, because I think that it just might be nonsense. But there was such a letter. It did contain a confession. There was discussion of getting the rifle back and that sort of thing. What do you think?
Well, I haven't read that full exchange, but the first thing I saw that stuck out to me as a former prosecutor is it says delete this exchange. So now we're talking about destroying evidence. That's a standalone crime all by itself. And, there's enough detail in there that if this is legitimate, it would be a key piece of the future prosecution that we're going to see. But it's hard to know what's real and what's not. In so many respects, we live in a post-truth world now where a lot of the so-called news we see turns out to be false, and the facts that are published online are later disproven as hoaxes. I don't know what to believe anymore. And I think that's the point of the whole propaganda operation that we're subjected to these days, is we have to wait and see and let some additional verification be done. What I'm happy to see so far is that the FBI under the Trump administration is coming out and giving the public a lot of information. Normally they hide behind this idea that we don't want to comment on ongoing investigations, which really sells the public short. The public can handle the information. The public pays for that information and owns it. And unless there's a real security reason to keep it secret, the public's entitled to that information. So I'm glad they're being transparent.
Thanks, Keith Gross. I hope you'll come back. And I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's great to be with you.
Great to be with you as well. Thank you. Okay, so we were talking about where do we go from here, free speech wise? What's legally going to happen with respect to this case? We've given you what pretty much the latest is on this, but I wanted to make sure you saw something before we say goodbye today, and it was the callback to what Erica Kirk said about what her husband loved on Earth, and she loved her Oregon Ducks, which kind of surprised me. I mean, he didn't go there. I went there for a year, and at the time I was going there, it was a long time ago. It was a terrible school. But now it's much, much better. It's totally woke, and God bless and Godspeed all those people who are normal who go there. But Dan Lanning is the football coach, and he learned recently, probably after Erica Kirk's speech on Friday, that Charlie Kirk was a big fan. And here's what he had to say. I think it's worth every single minute that you listen.
The people in this world can learn a lot from our locker room. You walk in that locker room, you got guys of different races, guys of different backgrounds, different religions, and you got a team that loves each other. Like tons of differences, where they come from, what they deal with, and ultimately you got a team that loves each other. And I think we're missing some of that in our country. You know, you talk about, you recently found out like Charlie Kirk was a Oregon fan, right? I didn't know that. I hurt for his wife, Erica, and their kids. Like that sort of evil should never exist in our country. And that's what it is. It's evil. Like, but I remember having to explain that to my family, right? I remember sitting down with my kids and explaining what happened. And they're talking about people talking about it at school, and it's just sad, right? But it's just as sad, you know, every day it seems like we deal with some sort of violence that's going on in our country, whether it's, you know, school kids in Colorado or kids in Minnesota at churches. I mean, life matters. You know, and I think we've lost sight of that. But I wish the world could learn a little bit of something from our locker room, because we got a bunch of people with differences, and what you got in there is a bunch of people that love there. And there's some people that'll be disappointed about how much I said about this, right? And there'll be some people that are disappointed that I didn't say enough, right? And I really don't care, right? What I do care about is if you disagree with me, if you hate me, if you don't like me, just know this: I love you. I absolutely love you, right? And life matters. And that's no way that Charlie should have experienced that. His family should experience that. There's no way that evil should exist in this world. And we have to continue to identify it and point it out and make sure that it's absolute evil. There's no reason in the world that our kids, we should be worried about sending our kids to school. It's our most valuable commodity in the world. They should be protected. And the reality is there's just not a lot of common sense on both sides. Like common sense says, oh, it's mental health, right? Common sense says, oh, it's guns. You know what? It's both. Like, let's have some common sense. Our kids should be the most protected thing in the world, right? Mm-hmm. They should have armed guards at every school, because there's sick people. There's sick people in this world, right? And on top of that, sick people need help. And it should be really hard for a sick person to have a gun. It should be really hard, right? And if people can't see that from both sides, how disappointing is that? But I just know, like, when you see moments like that exist right now in our country, like, I just think about my kids. And I remember I saw that video. It was disgusting. And I just told him, like, man, I hope my kids don't see that video. Like, how much does that suck? I hope Charlie's kids never see that video. Like, disgusting, right? And we glorify it. We praise it. You know, people are internet warriors, and those are sick people. And at some point, we need to go look at sports, because what our football team has is it has people on both sides of the fence. Right? And there's fans that love our team that have a lot of different opinions. And the truth is, there's a lot of things Charlie said that I did not agree with at all. There's a lot of things he said that I did agree with. But what's disappointing is I can respect those differences. Mm-hmm. And somebody else couldn't. And they thought that they deserved to be God in that moment, and they didn't. Right? And nobody should have to experience that. So, yeah, I got a lot of disappointment. We had we had Bible study with our team. We talked about it with our team, and I think our team feels the same way, regardless of views. I don't think they feel anybody ever deserves to experience what some people in our country are experiencing right now. It's super disappointing.
Yeah, sure is, to say the least. Super disappointing. You know, you'd thought we could feel free to say stuff. It turns out you can't. You can shout down. You can have the heckler's veto, which is what they I'll attempt to do every time there is a free speech event. I say the really far leftists. And then there's the assassin's veto. And when you do that, you show that you have nothing to say. You have no capacity to understand the other person's point of view. And finally, let me just draw attention to the fact that the entire world is mourning this man. And we'll go out on that.
Erstes Charlie Kirk, dein Widerstand und dein Einstand.
Yeah, the world will miss him. But now there are a million more Charlie Kirks. So bring it on. Remember, head up, heart out, and strive to be the adult in the room. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. We do not take you for granted. We appreciate every single person who tunes in every week to listen and watch this program. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, live streaming on Rumble, and then on every other podcast platform shortly thereafter when we can port it over and get it over there as soon as we can. All the shows can be found at victoriataft.com, where the censorship regime has been banned by me. Follow me on social media at these names: Victoria Taft, the Adult in the Room podcast, and the Victoria Taft Show. Send media inquiries, or any others for that matter, to victoria@victoriataft.com. And here's a big ask. Would you please subscribe, share, like, comment, recommend, and give this program a 5-star rating where you can? We really appreciate it. We do not take that for granted either. Follow my work at, you guessed it, victoriataft.com. PJ Media, I write tons over there. Flamingo Audiobooks, and of course the radio. I don't do this alone. This show is produced and engineered by Overall Media. 1A Cast is responsible for some of the Adult in the Room podcast's imaging. Logo design by Hageman Creative. The Adult in the Room podcast is produced at Flamingo Road Studios. All rights reserved.